Good afternoon. My name is Stella Natufe, and I work for the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Welcome to the BACP Business Education Workshop Webinar Series. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. On behalf of our Commissioner, Rosa Escareno, I want to inform you that business licenses can be processed online by visiting www.chicagobusinessdirect.org. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneurial Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. To help guide your business and employees during Chicago's reopening process, please visit www.chicago.gov/reopening. Also, BACP and the City of Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications created Shy Biz Emergency Alerts. You can opt in to receive targeted emergency alerts for your business. If you are interested, please visit chicago.gov/business alerts. We would like to encourage all of our attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Today's webinar is entitled SBA Update, Recovery Programs for Entrepreneurs. I will now turn this webinar over to Dehara from the SBA, Illinois District Office, for us to start.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate being invited to speak with you all today. We're going to be chatting with you guys about the Small Business Administration and some programs that we have available here for you. So as mentioned, we are really here to answer your questions and hopefully provide you with some information, a high-level overview of these programs. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to be presenting and I'll try and toggle the presentation and the chat to address any of your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because we do have a lot to cover. I may pause in between some of our programs just to address any questions and break up the information a little bit. So my name is Dara Perryman, and I'm an outreach and marketing specialist with the U.S. Small Business Administration. If you're not aware, we are with the Illinois District Office. We do have an office in Chicago. We are working virtually right now. And what the Small Business Administration does is we really support our small businesses at every stage of the entrepreneurial journey. So whether you need help starting a business, whether you need help maybe making a business plan, right now, a lot of our effort is helping businesses throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to talk about disaster relief resources for you. So we have some access to capital programs. We're going to get into that. We have Paycheck Protection Program, which you may have heard of, so we'll get into that. And then we have some new programs coming out and getting ready to launch. So we want to raise awareness about that as well. So that's a little bit about us and what we do. I'm also joined today with my colleague, Carol Harris. She is the lead economic development specialist for the Small Business Administration's Illinois District Office. Carol, are you able to hear us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. As mentioned, Dara and I are going to co-present information related to the Illinois District Office economic aid programs. We've got quite a few, and so let's get started. What we're looking to share is economic aid related to COVID-19 relief. This is an overview that we put together. And so what we'd like for the group to know is that, as mentioned, in February of 2021, the Biden-Harris administration took several steps to ensure exclusivity and equitable relief for America's small businesses. We know that small businesses anchor our neighborhoods, especially in Chicago, and help families build wealth. So President Biden signed off on this American Rescue Plan Act, And with this plan, it not only provided additional relief to the hardest hit, smallest of small businesses, but it also made quite a few modifications. And that includes the PPP Extension Act of 2021. And so I'm going to present some of the ins and outs of that program. That's one of our largest programs by which we've shared information with the public and made quite a few changes. And so we want you to basically be aware of the intended not only funding of this PPP program, but how it's been extended and how we're looking to make certain that we support the smallest of small businesses. So this screen reflects, I need to go back one. Thanks. Okay, this screen reflects the economic aid funding options. And as you can see, we've got the Paycheck Protection Program, which is one of the largest programs that impacts a lot of small businesses. And then also listed is debt relief that's been provided for SBA 7A, 504, and microloans. Those are the normal programs by which SBA is working with the lender. It could be a bank, it could be a fund, and we're providing what are known as guaranteed loans and or what's known as CDC 504 loans, and or we're working with micro lenders. And so in the background, what SBA is doing is providing debt relief for small business owners by which we have been assisting with the payment of principal and interest on these loans. In addition, we've got payment and grant programs. So one of the largest is known as EIDL, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We also have been working through what's known as the Targeted EIDL Advance, and we now have what's known as a Supplemental Targeted Advance program. And again, these programs are set up and they are intended to serve the underserved, the underbanked segments, women, minorities, and veterans throughout the Chicagoland area. Then we have the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. Now in Chicago, that's also known as SOS, which means Save Our Stages. And what's taken place is that that program has been put in place. We are looking to launch it very near in the future. And then, of course, there's what's known as RRF, which is the Restaurant Revitalization Grant. And that is going to be a grant, or effectively, it's really not a grant, it's a payment for eligible entities in the hardest hit industry. And there's approximately $28.6 billion that's going to be available related to that fund. Dara will share some information, and we're also going to put additional information about the program in the chat because we anticipate that we will host a webinar by which we can share that information with interested parties this coming Friday. Could we go to the next screen, please? Thank you. So here's some of the top takeaways related to the economic aid and the American Rescue Plan Acts, because keep in mind they're two separate acts and one kind of builds on the other and builds on the other. So we expanded PPP eligibility. We extended the covered period for PPP between 8 to 24 weeks. Okay, initially came out, it was an 8-week program, but small business owners are able to work with their lender and make certain if they need to modify that they can get it extended to 24 weeks. And the period officially now is 8 and to 24 weeks. A second draw, which means a second PPP loan option, was originated for the hardest hit small businesses. SBA has had the opportunity to work with IRS, and there have been some changes so that now IRS is recognizing the deduction of expenses that may be covered with forgiven PPP loan proceeds on federal tax returns. There's been an updated forgiveness form. One of the most important features of the PPP, which is known as the Paycheck Protection Program, is that there's a forgiveness feature by which a small business owner not just makes application and receives funding and documents the use of proceeds related to payroll and partially expenses, but a small business owner is able to make application for forgiveness. And forgiveness is super important because what effectively it does is it turns the 1% interest loan into a working capital or an equity injection for the small business, because there's a great possibility that the loan will be forgiven. So we have a simplified form. It's known as the 3508. There's various versions of it, but up to 86% of PPP loans that were submitted in 2020 have already been forgiven, and quite a few in 2021 have also been forgiven. And then the idle advance is no longer subtracted from PPP loan forgiveness amounts. So those are some of the key top takeaways. Next slide, please. Okay, the other thing that was super important is that previously we have provided equitable relief. And what that means is that lots of times for the smallest of small businesses, they were looking for a manner by which they could make the application right along with some of the larger small businesses. So we've been providing exclusive application periods by which lenders could only submit their applications for the smallest of small businesses and not-for-profits. Okay. We also increased the support for independent contractors, sole proprietors, and eligible small business individuals. And related to that prioritized window, I'd like for the audience to just be aware that consistently, whether it be the PPP loan, whether it be the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, as you will see in the future, and it's related to the restaurant revitalization, we are attempting to make certain that we have some periods of exclusivity for these super small businesses, whether it be related to which banks can initially apply or whether it be related to which small businesses will get approved first. We're trying to make certain that we're covering the smallest of small, the mom and pop businesses, the food truck operators, the vendors that may sell different types of delicious food, whether it be elote or whether it be hot dogs. We're trying to work with the smallest of small businesses and make certain that they have an equal opportunity at the table to receive funding. Next page, please. Okay, so let's talk about a few of the updates that came out of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as I refer to. There's the updated loan amount calculation for 1040 Schedule C filers. So this is kind of what takes place. Anytime, as a small business owner, you may look to make application, you're going to basically be required to have made certain that you filed a tax return for 2019. Hopefully, also you've gotten your 2020 tax return in. And between the tax return and the way you're organized, that has a lot to do as far as your legal entity with how you're going to look to make applications for these loans. So related to sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals, Schedule C filers. Schedule C is a schedule that's attached to a 1040 tax return. Can use gross income rather than net profit to calculate their PPP amounts. There was no retroactive ability for Schedule C filers who had already submitted a PPP using the old form. However, for PPP application Schedule C filers prior to March 3rd, you could speak to your lender to see if it could be withdrawn and or perhaps canceled so that the new form could be used. And if the loan had not already been dispersed and the lender has not filed a 1502, okay, excuse me, if the loan has already been dispersed and the lender has filed a 1502, then it can't be canceled. So if the loan had not been dispersed and the lender had not filed a 1502, it could be canceled. Okay. And so what's really, really important to say is when this change came into place, we tried to put in place some options to try to see if we could help some small businesses that were in the process. We notified lenders. We also have been working with small business owners. We can't retroactively change things, but if there's changes that have come about related to the legislative process, we were trying to make certain that we could address the needs of the small business owner. So the updated changes basically only affected small business owners who had applied for PPPs, and specifically those are sole proprietors. Okay, let's go to the next page. One of the things that had come about, and I want you to keep in mind, is you could use gross income. Now, previously it had been net, but now it's gross. Okay, so a few other changes that have taken place is that we've eliminated the restrictions on businesses with owners who have prior non-financial fraud felony convictions. We've eliminated the restrictions on small businesses that have owned or were controlled by owners who were currently delinquent or have defaulted on federal student loan debt. And we clarified that all persons that are lawfully living in the U.S. that have access to PPP, and that includes permitting the use of individual taxpayer identification numbers, which are known as ITINs, as an identifier for a PPP borrower. That's super, super important because, again, some of the smallest of small businesses may be utilizing an ITIN number. And so if they've made certain that they've documented, are paying taxes, we're saying that those small businesses that use ITINs would have the opportunity to apply for a PPP loan and actually be eligible for one. So when I step to the next page, we're going to talk about sort of this first draw, second draw. First draw is basically for small businesses that have not received a PPP loan prior to August 9th of 2020. They should have been in business by February 15th. Again, as mentioned, some additional types of entities are now eligible. We expanded the eligible expenses. And here's the key, and this is super, super, super important. You as a small business owner that may be interested in Paycheck Protection Program are encouraged to make your application on or before May 31st because that is the program end date. However, there's also the caveat that that is also until appropriations are exhausted. And my understanding, I've been receiving quite a few emails, is that the program proceeds are being utilized. So I want to encourage you, if you're thinking about making application for the PPP loan, you do want to move forward and make application as soon as possible. And then when we were talking about the types of eligible expenses that entities are looking at, those expenses are going to include your payroll costs. That would be to pay employees or to do perhaps a quick hire back of an employee. Keep in mind that the percentages are at 75-25 initially, but then they change to 60-40, which means 60% is utilized for payroll cost and 40% is your additional expenses. And those expenses, again, can include payroll costs. And then on the 40% side, that could include your rent, perhaps your mortgage interest, utilities, perhaps some operational expenditures, property damage costs, supplier costs, and perhaps worker protection expenditures. If you have workers that are interacting with the public and you need to make certain that they're able to utilize PPE, which is personally protective equipment, perhaps you need to buy gloves, perhaps you need to buy shields and or face masks. Those are the types of expenses that can be utilized with the Paycheck Protection Program under the 40% portion. Okay, so moving on to the next one. When we again talk about this PPP first draw eligibility, this is kind of what counts, okay? We wanted to make certain that 501c3 organizations were eligible. And also certain internet-only news and internet-only periodical publishing organizations are also eligible. Consistently and always eligible has been not-for-profits, so those are going to be our 501c3s, veterans organizations, housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, 501c6s, such as chambers of commerce, some news organizations, and the consistent business entities that we regularly see, which are going to be partnerships, corporations, LLCs, self-employed, independent contractors, sole proprietors, and of course, and always tribal businesses. And what's really important is that on that first draw, some of the eligibility issues that come up is that it tends to be for entities that have 500 or fewer employees, okay? And the public should be aware it does exclude professional sports leagues and organizations with the purpose of promoting or participating in political campaign or other activity, okay? Let's talk about now what includes a second draw. What is a second draw? So a second draw is that small business owner perhaps received that first draw and is looking to make application again for another PPP loan. Now the requirements have changed slightly, and they include that the borrower has previously received a loan, the PPP, but the number of employees has changed. It used to be 500 or less. Okay. Now it's 300 or less. So you may be a small business owner that has 20 employees. Based upon the size it relates to employees, you would fit under the first and perhaps under the second. Okay. The maximum loan amount now is up to $2 million. The first draw and second draw loan covered periods cannot overlap. So you remember we were talking about those 8 weeks to 24 weeks to disperse the funds. That's the covered period, and they cannot overlap. So you can't go at the 6th week of the first draw and then look to get a second and then begin to apply funds from your first draw and your second draw. They cannot overlap. They have to be separate. Your first 8 to 24 weeks and your second 8 to 24 weeks. Now, here's the key. There must be the demonstration of at least a 25% reduction in gross revenues between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. Comparable quarters on a calendar year are broken out perhaps to January through March, April through June, July through September, and October through December. 4 quarters, 3 months each quarter. And so what we're speaking of is that if you choose, let's say the second quarter, where there was a huge drop with a lot of businesses in sales, if the second quarter of 2019 happens to be, let's say your sales are $100,000, then you would look to compare that to the second quarter of 2020. And you remember we mentioned the 25% reduction. So if your sales were, let's say, only up to 74,000, which is 25% less than that 100,000 for the same comparable quarter, which is April through June, between 2019 and 2020, you would be eligible. And that's just kind of an explanation, comparable quarters, apples to apples, okay? Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk again about this PPP loan application process. You as a small business owner would look to connect with a PPP lender. The last time I looked at the listings, there were approximately 5,200 lenders across the nation that were participating in this program. You've got your brick and mortars that you will see on commercial corridors. You've got your large money center banks. You've got regional banks. You've got Illinois-specific banks. You've got federally chartered banks. You have state chartered banks. You've got micro lenders. You've got loan funds. We've got credit unions. We've got what are known as fintechs, which are financial technology firms. There's quite a few different types of lenders that are all participating in what's known as this PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. And I want you to keep this in the top of your mind. You want to make application as soon as possible because the program expires May 31st, which is Memorial Day of 2021. Okay, it's actually a Monday. However, it takes time to process the loans, okay? So to be able to prepare yourself, you always want to take a look at providing supporting documentation. You can work with an SBA resource partner. You see listed sba.gov/local-assistance to find a resource partner that may be able to help you complete the application. Again, if you're looking for where are the lenders, you can utilize our lender match, our paycheck protection find, or again, you can connect with a local assistance provider. The last thing that takes place in the background is that we are in the process of working with that lender, whether it be a bank, credit union, um, uh, let's see, savings and loans, micro lender. We're in the background working with them, establishing what's known as a compliance check and basically providing them with a loan number. Okay, so that's kind of what takes place behind the scenes. But what's super important is that you work with your lender to make certain that you get your application in as soon as possible. Could you now turn to the next page? Oh, take it. Thank you. Okay. So now I want to just kind of talk about some SBA loan terms, maturity, and some issues that come up, worst case scenario, that may impact the forgiveness feature. The first thing I want everyone to be aware of, and I mentioned this before, there's a fixed interest rate of 1%. It's non-compounding and non-adjustable. Excellent terms. There's no fees or prepayment penalties related to this Paycheck Protection Program. There's no requirement for collateral or personal guarantees related to the Paycheck Protection Program. There's so many good things about this program, and that includes the forgiveness feature, which I'll step into in a minute. But here's what's really important to know. Now, there's a 5-year maturity for those loans that were issued before June 5th. It was actually 2 years, but you had the opportunity, and that's June 5th of 2020, to work with your lender to say, hey, I need to get a modification. I'd like to have it extended out to 5 years. So you can ask your borrower, your lender, excuse me, you as a borrower can ask your lender to extend the loan term, okay? Now, here's kind of what comes up that happens related to forgiveness. Payments start once the borrower knows how much of the PPP loan is forgiven, and the lender will notify the borrower. And what it looked like was that initially these loans were on approximately a 9-month principal and interest deferment. But what was taking place is, and so much of what's really important is that a small business owner is going to look to send in that application form 3508 to request forgiveness. Because keep in mind, you've got this period of disbursement by which you're utilizing these loan proceeds to make your payroll. And in addition, you're looking perhaps to address some of your working capital needs. So once you work through that 24-week period, let's say you take the longest term, that's 6 months, okay? Then you would look to pull together your receipts, to pull together your information with your documentation, to pull down an SBA form 3508, and to make application for forgiveness, okay? So if you don't apply for forgiveness, payments start 10 months after the last day of the covered period. So you've got approximately 3 months if you take the longest extended covered period to get that forgiveness application filled out, completed, and into the borrower. And into the banker. Could we go to the next page? Okay, so here's the key. You got to apply for PPP forgiveness through your lender, and then lenders submit the forgiveness decisions to the SBA. Again, that form is 3508, okay? I want you to keep in mind that related to the CARES Act, because that was the first act that came out. Forgiven PPP loans are not federally taxable. Now, per the Economic Aid Act, okay, what's super important is that if you received an EIDL advance, and we'll talk about that in a minute, my colleague Dara is going to share some information about that program. Those advances are no longer deducted from PPP loan forgiveness payments, which is excellent. That expenses that are paid with PPP loan funds are federally tax deductible. That's super, super important. So the expenses that you pay, let's say you have you utilize the 40% in the working capital portion of the loan and you pay some expenses, they can be tax deductible, okay? That there is expanded forgivable expenses that are permissible for any unforgiven PPP loan, and that there is this new simplified forgiveness application, which is Form 3508 for PPP loans that are $150,000 and under, okay? Next page, please.
Okay, thanks, Carol. That was really great. We're going to move to our next program now. Before we do, I've been talking about, or I've been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat. So I'll go ahead and read through them, and then I will move on to EIDL. And then Carol, if you have anything to add to any of these questions, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
So the first question I saw is is there funding for startup businesses? So I did provide this person with a link to our micro loan program. So we do not have, if you're looking for, let's say, a grant or something like PPP for a startup, that's not unfortunately going to be available to you. But we do have a micro loan program where you would work with a micro lender. I believe the average micro loan is about $13,000. It is intended for startups. So there's that option. We also have traditional SBA loan programs as well, but that is a loan, and most of them are going to require, if you're a startup especially, at least a 10% down. But there are those options. You would go out to a lender, and SBA would guarantee a portion of that loan, basically making it easier for you to get a loan. But if you are looking for a grant or a payment or a forgivable loan, we don't have that for startups. As Carol mentioned, for PPP, you had to have been in operation by a certain date in order to qualify. Second question, will there be a third PPP loan anytime this year? I have not heard of that, any conversations of that on the Hill. I don't know, Carol, if you have, but at this time, we can't speak to any legislation that's not passed. So right now, the first draw and second draw, those are your options. So if you're a first-time borrower, you apply as a first-time applicant. If you applied for PPP before, received those funds, used them, and meet that additional criteria, you could get a second draw loan. So those are the two options. Now remember, PPP is limited to one per business. So if you do have multiple businesses with separate EINs, you could apply, but there is no third PPP loan option at this time.
Correct.
What about forgiveness for EIDL? So great question. EIDL is not forgivable. So I did put that in the chat. We just want to emphasize that. So EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I have it up on the screen right now. So what that is a direct loan from the SBA to the entrepreneur. So that is not forgivable. We'll talk about the targeted EIDL advance. Now that is a payment that you do not have to pay back, but that is not something that is open to the public right now. We'll get into more of that in a little bit, but just want to emphasize EIDL is not forgivable. That is a loan. Where can we get the forgiveness loan forms at? So you're going to apply to have your PPP loan forgiven through your lender, but I did also link on the SBA website that we do have all the forms there as well, so you can kind of go through them and get prepared.
Correct. That's Form 3508, and definitely the SBA website, or you can Google it.
Yeah. Next question. Should an individual apply for an EIDL or a PPP if he or she is a sole proprietor? So it's up to you. So there are two completely different programs. We're going to talk about EIDL here in just a moment. So maybe you'll understand it a little bit better after I go through this and can make the decision. But in a nutshell, EIDL is for working capital, and that is a loan that cannot be forgiven. There are some deferments right now. So your first payment is deferred depending on when you do get your loan. You do get it this year, it would be 18 months deferment. If you did get the loan last year, it's 24 months deferment. So there's that. If you're looking for a working capital loan, EIDL would be your best bet. Now, PPP, that is just to help you keep your employees on payroll for that covered period. And so essentially to have it forgiven, as Carol has gone through, 60% should have covered your payroll costs, 40% on your eligible non-payroll costs, so your rent, your mortgage, PPE, things of that nature. So you want to assess what you need the capital for, and you want to assess, are you in a space that you could repay back this money? Are you in a space where you're ready to take on a loan? Even though it is deferred, it is a loan, so you do have to repay it. So I would say assess your situation, and we'll go through EIDL in just a moment, so maybe that'll clarify some things for you. I was denied for credit score, but my credit is poor, but has increased about 100 points. So I'm not sure if this person is referring to EIDL. If you are, there is a reconsideration avenue. So if you do apply for EIDL and you're denied, you can have a request for the SBA to review your application. And if your credit score is increased, you can include that and you can authorize the SBA to run your credit again. So just keep that in mind.
Dara, I got a question. What about PPP credit scores? Do you know, are lenders running credit checks?
I don't off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think I would think the lender would evaluate the application. I know each lender, you know, has their own system for taking in applications and evaluating. I don't know off the top of my head with a straightforward response.
I don't either, and we didn't know if that small business owner was applying for EIDL and or PPP. Now, what I've been told is that with EIDL, there may be a request for the personal guarantee. With EIDL, there's not. We do know that with, on EIDL, there may be a request for the personal guarantee. For PPP, there's not. And we do know that PPP does go through some type of verification process, but we don't know if there's credit checks on PPP. I think.
Great. Yeah, the next question. So can you apply? I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Oh, I don't know if you're breaking up, Carol, if you were saying something. But the next question I see, can I apply for EIDL if I once but no longer receive PUA funds? So that's a really good question. So the key is if you are going to be utilizing any unemployment benefits, the key is to not double dip. So your EIDL is your working capital loan. So you really shouldn't, if you're, for example, using the EIDL and PUA, you just want to stay away from paying yourself and then also collecting unemployment. So for EIDL, remember it's your working capital. For PPP, you definitely could not overlap because PPP is a loan given, a forgivable loan if you apply to have it forgiven, to pay yourself if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor. So if you are using PPP and then also collecting unemployment, you would be double dipping, and you'd want to make sure that you're transparent with the unemployment office of that. So for EIDL, you shouldn't run into that issue because it's working capital, but just remember, don't use if you are going to apply for EIDL, you'd want to use that for your working capital needs and not to pay yourself if you are collecting unemployment at the same time. All right. All right, so I think we will move on and then we will keep going. So keep the questions coming. We're going to just move on to talk about some other programs, and then we'll pause and do Q&A again. So COVID-19 economic injury disaster relief or disaster loan, EIDL, we've talked about it a few times. So just to give you the basics, this one is a direct loan from the SBA to you, the entrepreneur, to you, the small business owner. Also, private nonprofits are eligible as well. So basically what it is, it's going to cover, it was essentially first kicked off to cover 6 months of economic injury. So that's going to look different for every person. You know, depending on your revenue, your cost of goods sold, it's going to look different for each person. But it actually has been extended, or I'm sorry, the loan has been, the maximum loan amount has been increased. So now instead of just 6 months of economic injury, you now are eligible for up to 24 months of economic injury. So before you were capped at 150,000 and now you are capped at 500,000. Now let's clarify that a little bit. That doesn't mean that you're automatically going to get a $500,000 loan. The SBA is going to have to look at credit history and most importantly, your ability to repay. So you know, that's going to be really important in your application. So for those of you who have already received an EIDL loan, the SBA has already sent out communication on how you can go about increasing your EIDL. So you don't have to worry about that. If you didn't get that email or that communication, let us know. We'd be happy to send that out to you. We could also just guide you to our website, and they should have that information up there as well. So a couple options for you. This is a 3.75% interest rate for businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. And another note, I did mention it. So your first payment is deferred. So if you were to apply in 2021, your first payment is deferred 18 months from the date of the note. And if you applied in 2020, your first payment is deferred 24 months from the date of the note. So that's about this program. You had to have been in business by January 31st, 2020 to qualify. So that's why we were mentioning the other programs with SBA. If you are a startup, you could not apply for the EIDL funds. That is how the program was written. So there is that strict start date requirement. So here's a little bit more information on that deferment and also that increase. So remember, if you have an EIDL loan already, you are eligible now to be considered for an increase. There is a process that is being played out right now. The SBA has sent communication to those of you with an EIDL loan with us currently. If you're a new applicant, we will automatically consider you using the new formula of up to 24 months of economic injury. I want to just move to targeted advance because it kind of flows together. So now targeted advance, now what this is, and I think that's why folks get a little confused about, is EIDL forgiven? What targeted EIDL advance is, essentially with the CARES Act in March 2020, what the SBA did was allowed businesses that were applying for the economic injury disaster loan, they allowed them the opportunity to apply for a one-time emergency payment. It was up to $10,000, and it was based on the number of employees you had. So essentially that group applied for that emergency payment, and the group, there were a couple things that happened. There was a group of folks who received the full, who did not receive the full 10,000. There was also a group that were approved to receive the EIDL advance, but funding ran out, so they did not receive funding. So now what the SBA is doing is targeted outreach specifically to those two groups. So again, the group that did not, that you already applied, you had to apply last year, you didn't receive the full amount, or you did not receive it at all because funding ran out. So those two groups, SBA has reached out to them. In addition, there's additional criteria that that group must meet. So you must be, and your business address must be in a low-income community. We have a map on our website so you can verify that. You must have 300 employees or less. And then you also have to demonstrate that you've suffered an economic loss greater than 30%. So additional criteria that must be met. So that is this program. The SBA has already sent out an email to the group that they are targeting. And then it's up to that group then to prove that they qualify for this program, and specifically those three criteria remarks: the 300 employees, they're located in a low-income community, and must have also shown that 30% economic loss. So that's what the target EIDL advance is. So that is, again, a specific program to those two groups of people. It's not a program that is open to the public. So for those of you asking about EIDL forgivable, know that that is only for a targeted EIDL advance program for a specific group. More information about that advanced program, and if you were among the group, here is how you know, that will go about and what information you would need to supply. So we will move on. I do see one question. Are you getting interest charged on the EIDL during your deferment? Yes, it's not a deferment on any interest. It's just a deferment on your first payment. So that, do keep that in mind. Your first payment will be deferred, but interest will still be accumulating. Could you give us the information on the increase? Yes. So I think once I'm done presenting in just a few moments, I will put in the directions in the chat, and that goes over how you can request the increase. There's an email, and then there's instructions with that as well. So I can put that in the chat for you. Okay. Somebody asked, could somebody guide me step by step to apply for these programs? I am in real estate in general. Okay, yeah, so If you are looking for more assistance as far as a step-by-step guide, I would recommend our small business development centers. You can find a center near you. I think I replied to this person. I'll put it in the chat as well. It's just sba.gov/SBDC. If you go there and put in your zip code, you can find a center near you, and the centers are a free resource for you. Give them a call and set up an appointment, and they can go over step by step with you as far as, you know, which program might be right for you. And they also could even help you with your business plan or pivoting. So a lot of different individualized services. Great questions. Okay, so Shuttered Venue Operated Grant. So this is a new program. Essentially, it's going to be over $16 billion that's going to be available to our shuttered venues. So our live venue operators, our theater producers, talent representatives, museums, zoos, and aquariums. They also have to meet specific criteria. So this program is getting ready to relaunch. The application was slated to open on April 8th. It opened for a brief time, and then there were some technical issues, so the program is not open yet. An open date will be announced soon, though. So if you are interested in this program, I'd recommend going on our website. We can put it in the chat too, just so you're aware, because there's a whole web page that you'll want to go to. There's a couple things you'll just want to do to get prepared. You'll want to look at the frequently asked questions. You'll want to go through, make sure that you're registered in some systems. So there's quite a few things that you'll want to do to prepare. And this is a grant. So this is a program that you want to take advantage of if you are among this group, because once the application goes live, this is a grant program that many people want to take advantage of. So you just want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible, taking the time to put as much effort in your application so you can be reviewed and potentially receive some funding for this group that have been really impacted by the pandemic. So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat right now, just the website to get you started on that. It's just sba.gov/SVOG. So again, this is for our shuttered venue operators, our live performing arts organizations, theaters, talent representatives, museums. More information on our website for you. All right, so we've already had some questions about cross-program eligibility, so I'll just touch on that a little bit. So you can utilize multiple SBA programs. So let's break it down. There's just some things you need to know. So you can have a PPP and an EIDL. So I've answered that. So Paycheck Protection Program, remember, that is the one that you have to go out and apply for forgiveness after you've used your loan proceeds. That is the one that you have to use the 60% on payroll costs. So you can use that and the economic injury disaster loan. You can apply for both. You can have one, you know, a PPP and an EIDL per business. The key is you cannot use the loan proceeds on the same purposes. And for the most part, you wouldn't, because remember, your EIDL is your working capital. So just take note of that. You can take advantage of both programs. Now, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, that is the one again for our live performing arts organizations, talent representatives, museums, zoos, that group. You cannot apply for a PPP loan after receiving the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. Now, if you received a PPP loan after December 27th, so 2020, so anytime this year, and you go out and you apply for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, what will happen is your PPP loan amount will be deducted from your Shuttered Venue Operators Grant amount. And that's if you received a first draw and a second draw, it would just be combined. So just make note of that, but you can, the only caveat again is you just cannot apply for PPP after you get, after receiving an SVOG. And you can apply for EIDL and the SVOG, so there's no conflict there. They just can't be used for the same purposes. Okay. So new programs. So there's a couple new programs, and then I guess we'll pause again for some questions because I do see some coming through, and I'll put some links in the chat that I owe you. Some new programs. So mostly what we want to get the word about is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So this is going to be about $28.6 billion a fund for eligible industries in this hard hit industry. So this is our restaurants, this is our businesses where their primary operation is in the food industry with restaurants specifically. So this is not yet open yet. This will be opening soon. Another grant opportunity. This is going to be administered by the SBA. If you are interested and want to get prepared, which again, we really recommend, you'll want to go to sba.gov/restaurants. So again, that application is not yet open, but it will be soon. And we actually are going to be hosting an in-depth training this Friday at 4 p.m. So I would highly recommend you registering for that. And I actually have that link handy, so I'll just go ahead and put that in the chat. Register for this event if you are interested in it, and we would be, more than happy to get into the depth as far as what this program is going to look like, how you need to start getting prepared, and how to calculate your potential grant amount. So all of that will be covered on Friday at 4 p.m. So I put that link in our chat, and it's on Eventbrite, so just make sure you register if you're interested in that program. Okay, so I guess the takeaways that we've discussed, we've gone into depth about Paycheck Protection Program, one of our biggest programs right now, the EIDL program, the loan, and then the targeted advance portion, and then our Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, so that's for our live performing arts organizations, our talent representatives. We've discussed that, and then encouraging you all, if you are interested in that program, to go out and get prepared for it for that reopen date. And then we briefly mentioned our restaurant revitalization grant. So again, that's not yet open, but it will be coming soon. So we have a webinar Friday at 4 p.m. and it would encourage you, if you're interested, if you're in the restaurant industry, to attend. So let's pause there and answer some more questions. Carol, have you seen any that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I said this, yes, I do. And I'm not certain where all that noise is coming from, but I just want to laugh. You know how small the world is. I just want to give a shout out to the Girl Scout leader that's on the line. We recognized each other. And I'm just laughing because the Girl Scout cookie process just went by. And don't laugh, it has nothing to do with this workshop, but it was just good to see a familiar name. So I wanted to talk with the small business owner that had the question about Chase and taxes and chasing an account. So one of the small business owners spoke to the fact that they had a problem, unfortunately, with Chase, by which Chase had closed their account. And I think they said that they had received idle funds. I think they said, let me read this question. I'm sorry. I'm an independent contractor. I applied and got approved for an idle. Chase closed my account. They requested all these documents that were not required and told me to apply for Cook County DBA, which means doing business as. I did as they asked, and they still held my funds. Business went down the hill. Is there anything I could do? And what I had suggested was that they really do have to work with Chase, and that they have to choose how to prove their case. Now, this is my understanding. Idle did not necessarily require that you have a business account, okay? So I don't know why Chase closed your account, and you do have to address that with your bank. But SBA does not have a requirement related to a business banking account. However, most banks do, period. So if you get a Paycheck Protection Program loan, there's a huge possibility for anyone that's on the line that the bank is going to say, okay, we helped you process this, or we're in receipt, we're the bank of record, you need to set up a business banking account. But I want to make this clear. That's a requirement because of the relationship with you with the bank, not with SBA. So SBA does not require that, but you should be aware that most lenders do require a business checking account. Now, let me give you the other side of it. Most fintechs, most financial technology companies do not. So just think through that. But the bottom line is you will have to look to address the issue with your lender. We had sent several links to someone who had asked for the information related to startup loans, and that was sent related to BACP, works with small businesses that are in the city. They will work with small businesses in the city, and lots of times they'll put together webinars and workshops by which they'll have microlenders and or small loan funds come and present to the public. So that's one place to find some additional information. Most SBA offices have certified microlenders, and so I was attempting to put into the Q&A the links to the 3 SBA microlenders that I know are certified that we work with. And that would be Justin Peterson. They tend to cover middle and southern Illinois. And then we work with what's known as CNI, which stands for Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives. I believe they're on approximately 111th Street near the new development that's in Pullman. And then we work with Axiom, but Axiom changed their name. Zara, do you remember their new name? Is it Alexis or Alertist or it's it
Yeah, we
begins with an it begins with an A, and it's a micro lender. They basically changed their name, and if I'm correct, I think they're working near the Hatchery, which is near Kedzie and Lake Street.
yeah, it's
It's
Allies for Community Business.
okay, Allies for Community Business. So Allies for Community Business, CNI, which is known as Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, and Justin Peterson are the 3 certified microlenders that SBA works with here in Illinois. Now, across the nation, there are other microlenders that are actively working with small businesses and providing small business loans. Small Business Majority works with some. Some of the smaller banks will have specifically a neighborhood revitalization fund or a microloan fund. And of course, BACP is always going to know whether it be related to licensing and or some of the other micro lenders that exist. So hopefully that provides some assistance to you so that you are aware of micro loan funds. And then another question that came up, and so that information was put in the chat, was I was sharing the Restaurant Revitalization Fund webinar. And Dara, you had mentioned that's going to take place Friday, April 23rd, 2021 at 4 p.m. And the registration is available through Eventbrite. Let's see. Chase. Oh, here's a really interesting question. Someone asked, if legislation states that your business is to be established by 2021, why are 2019 taxes required for PPP and targeted advance? My response back, just briefly, was that tax returns are required as a taxpayer, whether it be personal or business. Okay. And so some business owners are sole proprietors and therefore they may file a Schedule C. So that might be another way by which a tax return would be looked at. In other words, perhaps you didn't establish your business until 2020 and therefore it's 2021. And so you would be looking to file your tax return for in 2021 for 2020, but perhaps in 2019, very simply as a taxpayer, okay, you actually perhaps filed a Schedule C. Did you have any other suggestions or comments to add to that question about if legislation states your business is to be established by 2021, why are 2019 taxes required for PPP and targeted advance? Did you have any other suggestions there?
Nope, I think you hit that right on the head. And I'm just in the chat for those of you asking about the increase. I will put those instructions in the chat. You should have received that email from the SBA, but if you didn't, it's just COVID idle increase request at sba.gov. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat. You'll want to put in there on your subject line your 10-digit application number. And you want to make sure not to include any financial documents or tax records with your initial request. SBA may come back and request something of you to evaluate, obviously to give you an increase, but to make that official or that initial request, do not include any personal or financial documents. So I'll put that email in the chat for you all.
Okay, while she's adding that, I'm going to add a few more items, read a few more. There's a gentleman that mentioned targeted idle doesn't have to be paid back. Okay, so keep in mind that that's an advance, and therefore, as an advance payment, no, it does not have to be paid back. But I think, and unfortunately, this jumped a minute, it mentions also what is the status of the second round of targeted EIDL? I don't know that there is a second round of targeted EIDL. I can tell you that there's a targeted EIDL advance. So let's just talk about this supplemental targeted EIDL advance payment. We do know that there is the opportunity that exists for $5,000 payment for those that are hardest hit. Do you know at this point if we have established that program, Dara? I do not.
Yeah, we have not received an update on that program rollout.
Okay.
Right now, we're still working through that first round of just targeted EIDL advance payments.
Okay, thank you. So when you ask what is the status of the second round of targeted EIDL, but we should add advance onto that because there's a lot, there's EIDL and there's EIDL advance. So for targeted EIDL advance, we are working on the program for that. Another question, how much funding for PPP could a microlender lend to a small business owner? If I were to answer this for PPP, on the second round, the maximum, well, here's the key. A microlender may have limits on how much they can loan to an individual borrower. Why? Because they have funding limits, just like we all have budget limits, okay? So usually I have not talked with too many microlenders that make loans over 50,000. They tend to stay pretty small. They're micro loans. That is the marketplace that they operate in. So perhaps there's a possibility for a PPP that a microlender could make a loan up to 50,000. And then there are some very small lenders that are actually making a referral to a larger lender. I've seen websites by which they will say you can make inquiry related to a PPP, and they do small loans on the regular, and they work with small businesses, and they will get back to the person that made the inquiry, and they will say, you know, our PPP loan funding is closed. However, we would suggest that you would connect with, and they effectively pass the referral off to you, give you the information about who they suggest that you make application to. Okay, so just recognize that if a microlender may not be able to meet your needs based upon the calculation for a PPP, that they may also provide a suggestion as to who might be able to meet the needs that you have if the funding request is larger than the amount that they are able to deliver on. So here's another question. Can you expedite on the fixed interest rate of 1% that is non-compounding and non-adjustable, and that's related to the PPP. So yeah, the 1% interest rate is related to the PPP program, and it was very simply that with the SBA setting up the program to try to get cash to small business owners so that here's the key, so that they could maintain their employees, that they could maintain their payroll, and so they would not have to experience a lot of layoffs and or a lot of employees going to the unemployment line. They were looking to see what is a reasonable fixed interest rate by which we can work with small business owners and we can work with banks. And they came up with the 1% interest rate. Now, best case scenario, your loan is forgiven. Best case scenario, PPP loan is forgiven, and therefore the fixed interest rate of 1% never becomes really an issue because you've walked through the process of not just loan approval, but correctly dispersing the funds, documenting your disbursement, making application through the 3508 for forgiveness, submitting that to the lender, and the lender submits it to the SBA, and your loan is forgiven, and therefore the 1% interest rate never really becomes an issue because it is non-compounding, non-adjustable, and more so than that, you don't have to pay 1% interest on the loan amount that you initially borrowed that that has now turned into effectively an equity injection into your business. So I hope that helps. Okay. And then I
Yeah, that
just
was
want
a
to,
good response, Carol.
okay. And then I just want to laugh and say to the Girl Scout leader, yeah, it's a small world. Okay. So, so the,
I see one question here, a good
mhm,
question. What
mhm.
steps do I take if someone fraudulently used your information to apply for PPP loan? So I'll answer, and then Carol, if you have anything to add. My first response is to determine which lender they've applied to, because PPP, remember, you're not applying directly through the SBA, you're going out to a lender. So I would say, however you found out about this, whether you went to Chase, let's say, or another bank, and they've said, you've already have an application in process, try to get more information as to which bank it was, the application number, if you could get that, and then you can take steps to remedy that, like with the FTC. And then within SBA, there may also be another contact that we could give you. Carol, do you know of that contact or any input for this scenario?
It is an uncomfortable situation anytime a small business owner and or an individual runs into any aspect of consumer fraud. It's not a good situation. So SBA has put in place a couple things. Yes, obviously initially you want to find out about the bank. Hopefully it is your bank and they can give you as much information as possible. When I say hopefully it is your bank, just because you might have a working relationship with them and you can right then set up the guards that are needed to make certain that there's no perpetuation of this identity issue or fraud. Then the other thing that takes place is you can always walk through a process by which you can connect with SBA's IG. We have an investigator general that by which, now keep in mind, you're going to need to document everything that you are aware of related to this. Um, and you want to definitely begin to work not just with our inspector general, but you also probably want to work with the state attorney general. Okay, state attorney general offices are set up to work with, worst case scenario, any type of consumer fraud that may take place. Some people, especially if they're in Chicago, may also want to file a report with the Chicago Police Department. And then what I think is really important is you got to do two things. You have to do some investigative work as a small business owner or a person, but you also have to make certain that you put up guards so that you have the safety net surrounding you by which no additional fraud can be created. Okay, that's really, really important. So that may include a lot of verification that may take place on your accounts, perhaps a change of passwords, perhaps some additional safety words on your account so that whether you approach your lender and or any of the other credit facilities, they are able to walk through a 2 or 3 step verification to verify that it is really you.
Yeah.
But it is an uncomfortable situation, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah, if you do need anything else, I think that was a good summary. The OIG, getting as much information from that lender, possibly filing a police report as well. Keeping those records is going to be really good for you moving forward. And hopefully, as Carol said, hopefully it is with your lender who you have some sort of relationship with that could kind of help you through this.
Okay.
I have one question about forgiveness and that timeline. So how soon after loan approval and funding can you apply for forgiveness? So after you use your loan proceeds, you can begin to apply for forgiveness. You actually have until the maturity date to apply for forgiveness for PPP. So what that means is if you apply today, your maturity date is 5 years. If you applied before June, I believe it was June 5th, 2020, 2-year maturity date, but you can actually ask your lender to extend it to 5 years. But whatever your maturity date is, you have until the end of that to apply to forgiveness. But keep in mind that payments on your PPP loan are going to begin on the last day of your covered period, 10 months after that date. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, you can apply for forgiveness as soon as you use your funds. You're going to apply through your bank. through your lender. We have the forms online. Your lender will also have them. They're going to have their own way of how they want those to be submitted.
Okay. Let's see if there's any additionals. Dare, do you think we should share with the audience some additional information just about these upcoming about our upcoming funds, whether it be SVOG or RRF?
Yeah, I think, yeah, we've touched on most of them. I just, sorry, before we move on, I did see one other question about targeted idle. I received the email, I applied weeks ago, but no update. Yeah, so I actually get this question a lot, so I just want to address it. So because you received an email inviting you to apply to targeted idle, unfortunately, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get this funding. So we've sent that email out to the two groups, the targeted two groups, the groups that didn't receive it because the funding ran out, but they applied and their application was in, funding ran out, and also the group that received a portion, but not the full 10,000. So in addition to being in those two groups, so you were in one of those two groups and you got the email saying, hey, you know, we're launching the targeted idle advance and here's how to apply. So that doesn't automatically mean just because you received the email that you're going to get that funding. You do have to meet further eligibility requirements. So specifically that low income, your business must be in a low income community. There's a map on our website. So I would say verify that. Again, you must show a 30% economic loss and you must have 300 employees or less. So some people, you know, are saying that they received the email, they applied and they haven't heard anything. So a couple things I would say. One, you may not have heard anything because you do not qualify. Maybe you have more than 300 employees. Maybe you're not in a low income community. Or maybe you couldn't show that 30% economic loss. Or two, perhaps you do apply. It's just the SBA has a lot of folks to reach out to. So it could just be you're in the queue waiting. And I would just say be patient. If you do get a response that you have been denied for the targeted idle advance, I did include information in the chat about how to be reevaluated. So that to be reevaluated, it's an email address. It's targeted advance reevaluation at sba.gov. So if you did get that email and for whatever reason you applied and then SBA informed you were denied for that targeted advance, just send that information. I put it in the chat, not the Q&A. So just locate that and that is how you go through that process. So I just wanted to clarify that for you guys because I know that is a common question regarding targeted idle advance.
Okay. So then I think the other thing that's super important to share with everyone here as we're kind of rounding out our last few minutes is that SBA has definitely, all federal agencies responded to the public and very specifically to American citizens, individuals and corporations, sole proprietors and small business owners with a lot of different types of aid and economic assistance. And we were tasked with trying to make certain that we were able to get out large amounts of money to small businesses. Why? Because the whole point of operating a small business is to deliver a product and or a service, okay, in a manner by which you continue to create customers that want to buy or purchase that product or that service from you. And lots of times small businesses are in the aggregate the employers in communities because you don't just provide a service, but you also may employ a person that may live in that community. So the Paycheck Protection Program was enacted by which hopefully we could assist small business owners in making certain that they could meet payroll. As mentioned, that program we anticipate will expire per se May 31st, if not sooner, if the funding runs out. So you are encouraged to make application. But two of the programs that are definitely coming up are SOS, that's what we call it in Chicago, but nationally SBA refers to it as SVOG, which is the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. And what's taking place is that for small businesses that may be performing arts, theaters, museums, spaces by which there is active and live entertainment and or the programming for it, There is a specific fund that's set up. It's approximate. It's not total. It's approximately $60 billion. And it is actually a grant by which Dara had shared information with the audience. You want to look to make certain that you have created a profile. You do want to create that profile in SAM, which is known as the System for Award Management. And we anticipate that that program is going to go live very, very soon. Then the second part of it is that with RRF, which is known as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, okay, please be aware of the fact that we are going to host a live webinar, and that's Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. We've listed the link several times in the chat. It's an Eventbrite, and we actually listed it, believe it or not, also in the Q&A by mistake. But if you are a food vendor, okay, whether you have a sit-down restaurant, you might have a cart, you might have a food truck, you may have a hot dog stand, you may be providing food that is specific to a certain palate. Perhaps it's vegan, perhaps it's an ethnic type of food. We are trying our best to get the word out to small business owners of restaurants, okay, that there is a fund that is about to kick off by which funding will be made available. There's a period of exclusivity for the smallest of small, and we would encourage you to tune in to the webinar 4 o'clock Friday, April 23rd, to look to get information about the program. Now, Dara has pulled up the Stay Connected related to SBA links and contacts. Dara, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, this is how you can get connected with us. We are on Twitter. It's a good way to get real-time updates. The Illinois district email is just illinois.do@sba.gov. And then we just have some links here. You know, if you're looking for PPP, it's just sba.gov/PPP. The Shuttered Venue Grant is just sba.gov/SBO grant. And then restaurants is just sba.gov/restaurants. So we've put some of this in the chat as we've been answering questions as well, but it's up on the screen for you as well. If you want to just save that, they have a lot of basically everything we've talked about today can be found online.
I think that we've addressed the majority of the questions.
Hi, ladies. I think you guys did too during the presentation, which was excellent. I'm just reviewing. I was trying to keep up with you guys with the questions in the chat and the Q&A box. And I honestly believe you answered every single question.
There was one, I think I just came across, I've lost it, but a question about applying for if you have multiple businesses separately. So the key is if you have multiple businesses, if you have a separate EIN per business, you could do PPP per EIN or EIDL per EIN, whatever that is. So that's an important tip. And if you're a sole proprietor, you could use your social when you apply, but you just want to make sure that they are separate entities. So hopefully that clarifies that for you. Again, we have our resource partners as well, that if you do need maybe more one-on-one assistance, that you might want to get connected with them, like a small business center, for example, and they could give you that free assistance as well.
Hi, ladies. It's Stella again from BACP. Nothing. There's nothing in the host chat as far as questions, and nothing in the Q&A for the host. So it's safe to say that you guys did answer 95% of these questions. Well, ladies, if you don't have anything else, do you have any final words for our attendees today? Any words of encouragement when it comes to applying for these programs?
I think it's good to, as this screen says, stay connected. And what I'm getting at is you may operate in your community, in your neighborhood. And I want to encourage the small business owners, including the newbies. And when I say newbies, perhaps you're just starting up. Please make certain that you connect with the Neighborhood Business Development Centers, BACP, a Small Business Development Center. We refer to them as SBDCs. Perhaps you're a women-owned business and therefore you want to connect with what's known as a Women's Business Development Center and or a Women's Business Center, and or perhaps you're a veteran. We have a Veterans Business Opportunity Center where there's a person that is willing and able to work with veterans. It's important to stay connected because while you may sell your good and or service as a corporation or even as a sole proprietor, it is by being connected that you not only create additional sales, obviously with your excellent product and or service, but it is also in staying connected by which you are then able to talk with your Chamber of Commerce or perhaps a Small Business Development Center or perhaps a Neighborhood Business Development Center, and you then therefore become part of the business ecosystem along that corridor, along that strip, or even if you are operating a home-based business. By staying connected, that's how you become aware of the resources that may help you grow so that you are not just working in your business, but that you can strategically think through your next moves for your business. So I want to encourage you, stay connected. Tune into BACP webinars, connect with the Small Business Development Center, give SCORE chapter, utilize some of the online video conferencing and or webinars so that you can help grow your small business.
Thank you, Carol, for that. Again, if you would like to receive credit for today's webinar and you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, or you would like to be a part of this program, please send us an email at bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that email is bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. And to stay current on our program offerings, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Again, our website, you can find more information on our upcoming webinars at chicago.gov/business education. So ladies, if we don't have anything else to share with our attendees, I would like to thank you for this wonderful and informative presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Good day.
You too.